Hi, friends. Welcome back to our prophetic update for November 2025. Today, we want to look at two huge events that happened on Monday 17th and Tuesday 18th of November 2025 that could possibly bring about some major tectonic shifts in the Middle East. Firstly, we want to look at the United Nations Security Council resolution authorizing an International Stabilization Force, the ISF, in Gaza to demilitarize Gaza. And secondly, we want to look at Trump's approval to sell USA's most advanced fighter club, the F35, to Saudi Arabia, and how both these events could degrade the Qualitative Military Edge, the QME, of Israel in the region, and how this might impact US-Israeli relations in the days ahead. Okay, so on Monday, November 17, the United Nations Security Council adopted the US resolution presented by Ambassador Mike Walsh there, unanimously, 13-0 vote on Trump's Gaza plan, authorizing this transitional authority, the Board of Peace, chaired by President Trump, and authorizing an International Stabilization Force, the ISF, to ensure the demilitarization of Gaza, including the decommissioning of weapons and destroying military infrastructure in that area. And following that, the resolution concluded with these words: conditions may now be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. That is, if Palestinian Authority undergoes reforms and Gaza's redevelopment has advanced. And this resolution has come under fire from both the nation of Israel and the Palestinians in general. Now, we looked at that in our last prophetic update. This is Trump's 20-point plan, where there are 5 major milestones there. But the 5th milestone in Trump's 20-point plan talks about a potential pathway to Palestinian statehood, which is a bit vague, but the United Nations statement is more firm to say that conditions are now in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. And that's why the objection from Israel, but also with the Palestinians regarding the disarmament of Hamas in Gaza. Okay, so let's look first at Trump's F-35 jet issue. So on Tuesday, November 18, at the Oval Office, President Trump and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, they finalized the sale of 48 units of F-35 to Saudi Arabia. The US selling 48 units of this fighter aircraft means Saudi Arabia would be the first country in the Middle East, besides Israel, to operate the world's most advanced stealth aircraft in the region. And when President Trump was asked whether Saudi would get the same jets that were sold to Israel, President Trump said similar versions. Okay, these are not downgraded versions. And this itself can bring about changes to the regional strategy and shatter Israel's long-held qualitative military edge, the QME, in that region overnight. Although lately we hear from State Secretary Marco Rubio that now Saudi Arabia would get a lesser version than the one sold to Israel. Okay. Now, so Israel's QME, is it being compromised? First of all, we need to notice that F-35 fighter jets are like our iPhones, where it's still hugely being controlled by headquarters in America, all the electronics there. It limits the end user ability to modify the aircraft. Okay, but Israel's F-35 purchased since 2016, they call it the F-35I, I for Israel, the Adir aircraft, is a specialized, customized version of America's F-35 Lightning II aircraft, where Israel has been approved to bring about changes to the electronics of the aircraft. So the Adir fighter jet of Israel is its own advanced, locally developed electronic warfare with C4 systems, command, control, communication, computer systems that Israel was able to modify in this own aircraft, because Israel was given the source code of this aircraft itself. And besides, Israel has already got 10 years of experience using this aircraft since 2016. So the QME of Israel could still be intact in that manner. The concern, however, is not so much Saudi purchasing 48 units of F-35, but concern is to the northwest. The real threat is Turkey, not so much Saudi Arabia, because President Erdogan is eager to purchase all these F-35s again. In fact, President Erdogan of Turkey has been with the F-35 program since its developmental stage at the turn of the century. But friends, President Erdogan turned to Russia to get the S-400 surface-to-air missile for its defenses. And this could endanger the F-35 aircraft. And therefore, since 2019, Turkey has been barred from purchasing or participating in developing this F-35 program. And yet, it is being said that President Trump is considering selling F-35 to Turkey again. That's the real concern, because Turkey, under Erdogan, has been on a war footing with Israel for a long, long time. Turkey has always had this imperialistic design to retake all the territories that it once had under the Ottoman Empire. President Erdogan believed in their historic role to reinstitute the Ottoman Caliphate. They are going through history books, old maps, looking at places where they once controlled and governed, and aspiring to take back those places to be great again. Erdogan is called Islam's new leader, the Sultan of the new Caliphate. And Turkey has been a refuge for the Muslim Brotherhood, for Hamas, who have found shelter there in the nation. And Turkey has a very jihadist interpretation of Islam. It's very hostile towards Israel, calling Bibi Netanyahu a Hitler himself, praying for the demise of Israel in public. And yet Trump seems to want to overlook all this danger to consider Erdogan as a friend. That's the concern that Israel has. And scriptures are clear to us that calamity to Israel will come from the north, not from the south. All right, let's do it. Jeremiah 1:14. The Lord said, out of the north calamity shall break forth on all the inhabitants of the land of Israel. Behold, I'm calling all the families of the kingdoms of the north, says the Lord, and they shall come. Each one will be setting his throne at the gates of Jerusalem, against the walls all around and against all the cities of Judah. Jeremiah foresaw that. An enemy is coming from the north. God has always framed to us in the scriptures the north, not the south, as the seed of impending judgment on Israel. Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 1. Again, the prophecy, blow the trumpet in Tekoa. Today's Gush Etzion, about 5 kilometers south of Bethlehem, 15 kilometers south of Jerusalem today. Disasters comes out from the north, great destruction. Behold, a people come from the northern country, from the farthest parts of the earth with bow and spear. They are cruel, they have no mercy. They ride on horses as men of war set in array against you, O daughter of Zion. So we look at the north there as possibly represented by Turkey mainly. Is Turkey and Israel heading for war? And to get F35s in Turkey itself is a real concern. Let's look at the Gog and Magog war of Ezekiel 38:15. Again, the prophet says, you will come from your place out of the far north, many people with you. And all those nations mentioned there, archaeologists believe that they are mainly in the region of Turkey today, of course, including Iran as well. And they are all riding on horses, a great company, a mighty army. You go, you will come against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. So this prophecy concerns this northern prince Gog, a mysterious enemy that would come from the far north. Many people say it will be from Russia, although most of the regions mentioned there are possibly in Turkey today, somewhere there, somewhere north there. It's going to be a military threat to Israel. This talks about a final end-time enemy, an adversary that is stirred up by God's hand himself to invade Israel. But we know, of course, that they would meet in the end God's fire and fury. Okay, if we look at the entire chapters, Ezekiel 38 and 39, those enemies will all be destroyed as Jesus returns to stop the war and to save Israel. That's the time of Armageddon. Okay, so we looked at that previously. And in Ezekiel 38, verse 13, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all their young lions will say to you, O God, have you come to take plunder? Have you gathered your army to take booty, to carry away silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods, and to take great plunder? So we see here Sheba and Dedan. These are two regions that many scholars believe are in Saudi Arabia today. So Saudi Arabia are not part of this invasion, but they will be protesting against this invasion. The merchants of Tarshish and all their young lions have been interpreted severally as countries in the Western Mediterranean region, maybe Spain, England. The young lions could possibly be America itself. They are not helping Israel in the end, but they are protesting. Protesting where? Possibly at the United Nations General Assembly. Have you come to plunder Israel? All right, so Saudi Arabia possibly could not be a major enemy to Israel in the end. All right, not participating in this Gog and Magog war, but not helping either. Okay, that's what we are seeing here. And so the concern that Israel has, could Saudi Arabia become a major enemy of Israel in the end? Yes, we see some of that in the Old Testament prophecy, Genesis chapter 16, verse 12, the prophecy given to Hagar concerning Ishmael. He would be in conflict with his brothers all the time, including his stepbrother Isaac. So there is this perpetual conflict between the two brothers there. And Psalms 83 talks about these 10 nations that would gather against Israel, including the tens of Ishmael and the tens of Hagarites. So again, this refers to Saudi Arabia today. So could Psalms 83 be prophetic of end time where Israel would have to face the tens of Ishmael, Arabia? Or, as Amir Safati said, Psalms 83 has actually been fulfilled in 1948 when 10 nations or 8 nations came together against Israel in the War of Independence. We see that happening in Judges 8:24, okay, where Gideon had to fight with the Midianites again, Saudi Arabia. First Chronicles chapter 5, verse 18, where you have 3 tribes of Israel there in the West Bank, Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben, fighting against the Ishmaelites. So yes, there are conflicts between Ishmaelites and Arabia throughout the Old Testament era there, but we have not seen Saudi Arabia being antagonistic to Israel since the Yom Kippur War in 1973. But recently, instead, we saw Saudi Arabia assisting Israel, covertly at least, in the 2024 and 2025 missile attack from Iran to Israel. We have reports that Saudi Arabia, Jordan, use their own defense missiles to intercept all these drones and incoming missiles from Iran. Saudi Arabia provided intelligence, drones, and military interception to help Israel during those days of conflict last year and earlier this year, June. So President Trump giving Saudi that status of a great ally. When questions was asked to President Trump, Israel is a great ally and the Saudis are a great ally too. So for Israel to hear that coming from President Trump, it was a bitter taste to Israel. It was a punch in the stomach there, right? Because Israel has always helped America to fight off US enemies in the Middle East, Iraq, Syria, and even lately Iran. Israel is America's point man in the Middle East. And to hear President Trump equate Israel with Arabia as America's great ally, that's ironic. Because it wasn't long ago that 9/11 happened. September the 9th, 2001, when the World Trade Towers came down, 18 out of the 21 hijackers that crashed into the World Trade Center, they were from Saudi Arabia. And therefore, it is understandable why Israel is feeling snubbed by America lately. Well, we try and understand why President Trump is so pally towards Crown Prince MBS lately, okay? Because of Saudi's relations with China greatly has warmed up. Since 1985, with the development of China there, Saudi Arabia has become China's #1 customer in providing oil exports into China. Saudi Arabia wanted a missile defense for itself, but America refused to sell missiles to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi began to turn to China to get the missile technology. And when President Biden was in office, the pariah rhetoric that was given towards Saudi Arabia was very hurtful to Crown Prince MBS because of the Jamal Khashoggi incident in Saudi's embassy in Turkey. At the same time, President Biden was withdrawing from the Middle East, withdrew from Afghanistan, withdrew from Iraq. So there was a power vacuum in the Middle East as perceived by Saudi. And Biden was pursuing a policy to try and bring Iran into the equation, softening on the nuclear disarmament issue. And then in March 2023, China staged this Saudi-Iran diplomatic restoration. Ambassadors met together between Iran and Saudi. That brought about President Xi's global security initiative. Prestige towards him. And at the same time, Saudi Arabia was developing its economic and its security diversification program, Vision 2030, the NEOM development project, the Riyadh development project. And so China came in at an opportune time to work together, this economic synergy between Saudi Arabia and the Belt Road Initiative. So China was coming to Saudi Arabia. President Trump saw that. And then in September this year, Israel's attack on Doha made relations with Saudi and Israel even more tense. President Trump had to step in to try and salvage this situation. Let's explore further. Now, Saudi Arabia has always been concerned about Iran. Okay, Iran's goal has always been to dominate the Middle East with its proxy nations like Syria, like Iraq, like Yemen and Lebanon, and so on, using them to bring about instability in the Middle East. And there was direct security threats from Iran and Yemen itself when they shot missiles into Saudi Arabia in 2018-19, sabotaged their oil refineries. Missiles into Riyadh itself from Yemen. It was intercepted. And there was this Shia-Sunni sectarian antagonism where Iran claimed to be the sole Islamic jurisprudence over the area. Iran, Khomeini claimed the sole right to interpret the laws of Islam. That threatened Arabia's situation. And of course, the nuclear concerns. Saudi Arabia has always been concerned about Iran's pursuit of the nuclear weapon. It's open to nuclear attack from Iran. And therefore, Saudi Arabia was turning towards China, turning towards Pakistan to add diversified areas of protection over Saudi Arabia. But when Trump came into office, he is in the stage to sell weapons into the world, to make the defense industry in America profitable again. So it's important to Trump to draw Saudi Arabia back into the West. All right, so granting Saudi Arabia a major non-NATO ally status, okay, out of 21 major non-NATO ally of America in the world. So Saudi Arabia now be granted that status with some financial and defense privileges. It's a big step forward to US-Saudi relations, a very positive move by Trump. It pulls Saudi away from China's fear of influence that has been coming up because of President Biden's remark, and getting Saudi Arabia to rely on the US fighter jet F-35 means Saudi Arabia has now come under the US national security. It will keep them within the US-led alliance in the region against Iran eventually, and China too. So Trump saw this strategy and was trying to bring Saudi Arabia in. The concern, however, is Qatar, all right? Qatar was also a major non-NATO ally. Given the status by President Biden again, okay, possibly because Qatar is where the headquarters of the US Central Command is in the Al Udeid Air Base there. Okay, Qatar helped President Biden in the Afghanistan evacuation, and Qatar has always been helping US in the Gaza mediation effort. All right, so yes, President Trump also assured Qatar guaranteed US security support after the September the 9th Israel bombing of Doha debacle. President Trump has got to come in to save Israel from that entire Middle East ganging up against Israel after Israel bombed Doha. But friends, Qatar is a terror-supporting country. The headquarters of Hamas is there, the Muslim Brotherhood is there, it funds terror. The Taliban is there. Al Jazeera, the media center, is there that is anti-Semitic. And Qatar, the latest report, has spent over US $20 billion in fomenting this anti-Western, anti-Semitism sentiments in American universities and undisclosed funds in other organizations in America. So compare between Saudi Arabia and Qatar itself. Israel should have less issues and concern with President Trump giving this major non-NATO ally status to Saudi Arabia. The real concern should be in Qatar, here, okay? So again, scriptures is very clear on this to us. Choose your friends wisely, and Israel has a right to be concerned. Exodus 17 verse 5, be careful not to make a treaty with the inhabitants of the land that you are entering, lest they become a snare in your midst. Proverbs chapter 12, 26. The righteous will choose their friends carefully. So Israel is concerned. Israel, Saudi Arabia, or America, but the way of the wicked will always lead them astray. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 33, do not be deceived. Evil company will corrupt good intentions, good habits. Scriptures everywhere warn us to choose our friends, allies, carefully. Okay, let's come to the qualitative military edge of Israel. Now, we know that US is committed to preserve Israel's qualitative military edge in the Middle East because Israel is US most loyal ally with its shared values and interests to preserve democratic values in the Middle East, be a representative of US values and US interests in the Middle East. And so Israel has always been a powerful ally to project the American force in the Middle East. I mentioned that just now. It uses the American platform to defeat both Russian and Iran platforms in the Middle East, overcoming Iraq, overcoming Lebanon, overcoming Yemen, and lately Iran itself. Okay, so Israel has represented America in these dimensions of war. And so it is to America's interest to ensure that Israel will be equipped with the best policy that serves both US and Israel very well. It keeps Israel sharp and strong in the Middle East. Alexander Haig, the state secretary to President Reagan and other presidents after Reagan, he said this: Israel is America's largest aircraft carrier, unsinkable, representing America in the Middle East. Now, coming back to Israel's qualitative military edge. As I mentioned just now, Israel has got US authorization to modify the internal circuitry of their F-35 RD aircraft, upgraded them with AI autonomous MDO operation, artificial intelligence, generative and agentic AI that make decisions on their own. Multiple domain operations, whether it operates over land, over sea, over air, over space, and even in cybersecurity. It has agentic AI controlling all this circuitry. Their planes have got extended range fuel tanks to fly from Israel to Iran without having the need to refill mid-air. Israel has hypersonic PGM, precision-guided missiles, all controlled by AI today. Israel has got the Harop suicide drones. Harop drones are those that can be intelligent, that can hover over enemy territory and select their own targets without user control back home. All these are AI embedded technology in the latest QME. It has counter UAE systems. There's drone warfare technology. It has perfected the anti-tunnel urban warfare. The US could learn from Israel in all these things. And lately, Israel has developed this iron beam laser system that has just become operational lately. Laser beams. That is now based on land-based and is still huge bulky system, but research is going on to militarize it and put it on aircraft and on guns. And so you have the laser beam aircraft fighters, you have their laser guns and lightsaber technology of Luke Skywalker. We are into the days of Star Wars itself. Israel is ushering Star Wars into the world today. And all these are qualitative military edge that Israel has over the regions in the Middle East, and US could learn a lot from them. And Israel can bless America by sharing all this technology with America. For example, America has now come up with this Golden Shield, Golden Dome project, which is based on Israel's Iron Dome project. The technology is there. The Israeli expertise is there, and that's why there's been discussion lately that the upcoming foreign military financing package that is now being discussed between Israel and America, it should not be seen as a foreign military aid, money given by America to Israel, which is the perception of the world today. All right, the world thinks that America is giving money to Israel and wasting taxpayers' money from the USA. People don't understand that even with all the grants, $38 billion in the past 10 years military package, 38 billion US, 3.8 billion a year, it requires Israel to buy back from US military hardware. It is not money given freely to Israel. Israel has got to spend it to buy US equipment, thereby keeping US defense industry alive. And so the upcoming discussion on the next 10 years will work on a different format where there is this interdependency between Israel and America. It's not just one way. Israel is blessing America as well, and this has got to be made known. Now, friends, with that in mind, I want to step up further to look at what we've been discussing in our last prophetic update. How Israel has been losing on this eight-front war against world public opinion and the negative media and vocabulary hijacked by the world today. Israel seems to be losing out. So as a follow-up to what we've been talking about, how the foreign military funding could be vouched in a more balanced media presentation rather than aid coming directly from America, which seems to give a negative image on Israel. How Israel should have more proactive dissemination of its information rather than what we are seeing today, reactive. Every time there's a problem, we see Israel reacting to it. Israel should take the lead in becoming more proactive, instilling this national consciousness among the school students in their education curriculum. That apparently is lacking in the education system of Israel. Using all these channels to try and humanize the Israelis. And the idea, they are not just murderers, genocidal warriors. These are human people. Give a human slant to their stories, a personal slant to the stories of these soldiers, rather than how they have gone in and killed this terrorist and killed that terrorist. That's generating a lot of negative media. You need to emphasize the right to self-defense because these enemies pose an existential threat to the state of Israel. Draw parallels with what the world has done against ISIS. Right, to give them that international legitimacy that Israel is not on its own in its battle against terrorism. Right, so maybe there's a need to highlight shared values and diversity in the social structure of Israel itself. More news on how the Arab citizens of Israel have thrived in this Israeli economy, how their contributions have been valued, and how they have participated in the professional sectors of Israel itself. Give prominence to the Arab citizens and how they are doing well in Israel. You don't see this news. All right, and perhaps Israel again needs to be more humble, acknowledge some of their errors. If whenever errors occurred in their Gaza operations there, give a more balanced, fact-based response to all the negative media that's flooding the world. Look at what President Trump and his press secretary is doing every day, giving a chance for the media, not just Israeli media, but guest foreign media invited to all these press conferences. President Trump has this almost every day. Every time any foreign dignitary visit the Oval Office, he opens it to the press. At least the world gets to hear of what Israel is doing in its daily administrative functions. At least this would counter all the disinformation and the vocabulary hijack that the world has overtaken, and give the world instead facts and the proper context. There could be more diplomatic strategies taken by the media services in Israel to coordinate with more pro-Israeli groups, NGO lobby groups like IPAC and Zionist organizations in America. Cultivate more grassroots advocacy, invite foreign media sponsor visits, get influencers and TikTok, right, to put more positive, honest Israel messaging out there. Because right now the world is getting all the negative media from Al Jazeera. TikTok has been used to promote anti-Israel sentiments there. That's the concern. Israel perhaps should also be more transparent in its humanitarian efforts. It's been providing aid into Gaza. Columns of trucks are entering Gaza. We don't see news of what Israel is doing on the good front. Have more publicity on all the positive things that Israel has done to the world, all the high-tech inventions that Israel has blessed the world with. Even when Israel offered assistance to manage crises that happen in different countries, have more exposure on these things. Like recently, the Iran water crisis. Yes, Bibi Netanyahu offered a specialist in water desalination to Iran. That's good, but to couple it with regime change as a condition, that's ugly. Scripture says, do good so that the world can see the good things you have done and to give glory to God. When you do good to an enemy without conditions, you are pouring coals on their heads. That's what Jesus said. And so there needs to be some change to the media proactive information sharing that Israel should have. Now, I don't know why I'm sharing all this with you. Nobody has asked me about this, but these are thoughts that are going on in my mind. Okay, let's go back to scriptures. Now, we know that whatever the world has leveraged against Israel, scriptures are clear that God is faithful to his word. God will keep Israel. Isaiah 54:17, no weapon, whether it is military weapon or it is PR weapon formed against Israel, shall prosper. Every tongue that rises against thee, you shall condemn. And this is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. Do not slander Israel, God says in Zechariah chapter 2, verse 8. You are poking at the eye of God because Israel is the apple of God's eyes. Psalms chapter 2, verse 1. Why do the kings of the earth and the people plot in vain against Israel? You are plotting against the Lord and his anointed. Because God is going to laugh and scoff at all their schemes. And God is declaring, yet I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion. Jerusalem is still the place where I will set my throne. So you find all the scriptures all over that assures us that God is faithful and he will protect Israel. Zechariah 9, Zechariah 12, Zechariah 14. It's all over. And to think of Israel's qualitative military edge, I come back. I'm thinking of this verse. Look at David when he confronted Goliath. Goliath comes with all kind of military hardware. And David said to this Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, with a bazooka, with all your missile technology. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. That's Israel's QME. It's the name of the Lord of hosts and the God of the armies of Israel. And all this assembly, all you Philistines, you shall know the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle belongs to the Lord, and he will give you into our hands. Israel needs to know that. Israel needs to turn back to the Lord. That's their QME. Moses has already warned since the time that they were coming into Israel. And Moses said, when you go out to battle against your enemy and you see their horses, you see their tanks, you see their chariots, you see people more numerous than you, 200 million. Do not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God is still with you, the Lord who brought you up from the land of Egypt. All over, scriptures testify God's protection, despite the enemy's superior weaponry. God is there to protect. If you would turn to God. 2 Chronicles chapter 32, when King Sennacherib of Assyria surrounded Israel, Hezekiah pleaded with God to help. Exodus 14, Moses said, do not be afraid, because God will destroy the Egyptians. Judges chapter 17, Gideon with 300 destroyed the entire Midianite army. That's Israel's QME. And so for Israel to be doubtful of President Trump's initiative, President Trump's approval to sell F-35 jets to Saudi Arabia and declaring Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally, look at what President Trump has done to Israel. So Trump in his first term was the most pro-Israeli president to make all those decisions to bless Israel, making Jerusalem, right, the eternal capital of Israel, setting the U.S. embassy there in Jerusalem, approving Israel's annexation of Golan Heights in 1967, bringing about the Abrahamic Accords to secure friendly relations between Israel and Bahrain and UAE, Morocco, Sudan. Quit the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran, right, to come against Iran's nuclear strategy, cut funding to UN Relief Works Agency, UNRWA, who has been supporting Hamas and the Palestinians in Gaza. And Trump was very equivocal towards Israel in its strategies to settle Judea and Samaria. That's between 2017 and 2020 in his first term. And then we saw in his second term just recently, Trump helped Israel to bomb Yemen in April 2025. Trump helped Israel to take out Iran's nuclear sites in June with his B-2 bombers. And when Hamas used that hostage strategy to stop Israel from fighting Hamas, forced world opinion to come against Israel, Trump came in and changed all the strategy. Trump instead forced Hamas to return all the hostages in October. So now all the hostages, bar two, still missing, they are welcome home. So Trump has been very positive towards Israel. And this UNSC resolution, if implemented, that's a big, big if, that will assure Israel's and Gaza's security. You must understand all the backroom diplomacy that's happened, Marco Rubio, Ambassador Mike Waltz, all the horse trading before that resolution is presented. Yes, the wordings have got to be slightly altered to get all the approval of all the Muslim majority nations and the entire Security Council. Credible pathway to Palestinian statehood. It was the same, except the wording might seem more generous towards the Palestinian Authority. And mind you, friends, Trump has been fighting a PR war on behalf of Israel. Back in the streets of New York itself, Trump has come against all these anti-Semitic, anti-Israel choruses in the US, taking action against them, deporting some of them. That's being done on behalf of Israel. So Israel should not have this major concern on Trump's record with Israel itself. Whatever misgivings, whatever issues that Israel have with America can be negotiated diplomatically, especially in this upcoming foreign military financing, the FMF, not aid to Israel. Okay, I must move on quickly. So all the hostages are home, and when I think of hostages, this thing came into my mind. Okay, Israel has been trying to negotiate with Qatar, with Egypt, to try and get the hostages out since the past 2 years, to little effect, until God intervened and used President Trump, right, to bring all the hostages back. Thank God for that. But look at this verse in 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 8. What happened was David has gone out together with the Philistines to fight its wars and negotiating with the Philistines, pretending to befriend the Philistines. However, when David was out, the Amalekites came and invaded his home in Ziklag, took away his 2 wives and took away the Israelis settlers there, hostages. Right? So David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this troop? And shall I overtake them? All these Amalekites that had raised Ziklag and took all these friends of David as hostages away with them, David's 2 wives and all his men. And the Lord answered, yes, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail you will recover all the hostages back. The moment problems came in, David inquired of the Lord, not from Qatar, not from Egypt, like what Israel has been doing. Look at Acts chapter 12. Peter was arrested by Herod, held hostage in prison. And when Herod was about to present Peter as a hostage, as his hostage to Rome, the constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church. And when Herod was about to bring him up the next day, that night itself, the angel of the Lord came in and took Peter out from the prison. The church was interceding for Peter. Where was the church during the 2 years of the hostage crisis? Were they praying, helping to intercede on behalf of Israel for the release of the hostages? I think of the hostages, I think of these 2 events here, turning back to God. Israel and those that are standing with Israel to help with Israel with this divine military edge. Okay. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 5. Thus says the Lord, cursed is the man who trusts in man, make flesh his strength, but whose heart will depart from the Lord. Many in Israel still need to internalize this into their policy making. God is talking about allegiance to him first, not to Qatar and Egypt and America trying to solve problems. God requires wholehearted allegiance, because divided loyalties will erode your faithfulness to God. God is talking about who you choose to be your partner. Is it God or other nations? Association, your close bonds, whether it be in political field or military field, your close bonds and your dependencies will shape your values. And finally, the purity of worship here. Trust in the Lord. Okay, protect that worship and that trust in the Lord from being contaminated, all right, by trusting in other nations. This is the covenantal blessing that God has promised to the nation of Israel. Okay, quickly now, I must quickly get to the United Nations Security Council that backs Trump Gaza plan. All right, so the Security Council has now authorized this International Stabilization Force to demilitarize the Gaza Strip here. Its mandate is to stabilize the security environment in Gaza, to work together to support demilitarization of Gaza, dismantle the terrorist infrastructure. It's given the authority to maintain the safety of Palestinian civilians, escort humanitarian aid in, and to operate under the strategic guidance of the Board of Peace chaired by President Trump. President Trump is going to be the new governor of Gaza Strip itself. And this legitimacy is effective for the next 2 years till the end of 2037, unless the Security Council takes further action. But the question is this: can the International Stabilization Force have the experience and the ability to fight the Hamas? Because Hamas is saying, no, we are not going to disarm. Hamas has been arguing that its fight against Israel is a legitimate resistance, is an internal Palestinian issue. All right, it does not concern the world. This is our internal resistance against Israel. And Hamas will not tolerate anyone who is acting on behalf of the occupation. So Hamas sees the ISF, International Stabilization Force, as being an ally to Israel. And we will not tolerate you to come in to fight on Israel's behalf. That's what Hamas is saying. And if UN wants to send in a force, it will be only as a role as bodyguards to facilitate the flow of aid into Gaza. That's the role that Hamas allowed them to play. And so when Hamas takes its firm stand to resist the ISF, we will fight you. Jordan, UAE, that has been supportive of Trump's 30-point plan, immediately withdrew. Azerbaijan, Pakistan, Indonesia, that also were interested to join the ISF, now have come in with conditions. Unless the Hamas is disarmed first, then only we can come in. And Israel has refused to allow Turkey and Qatar to join the ISF because Turkey and Qatar, they are sponsors of Hamas itself. They protect Hamas. So you can't be given the mandate to disarm Hamas when you're shielding them. So Israel has the right to refuse Turkey and Qatar coming in. So you see this UN Security Resolution unraveling today. That's the usual gap between diplomacy and reality on the ground. The implementation phase is always problematic. The same thing happened with UNSC 1701 in Lebanon. Right at the end of the Second Lebanon War, the United Nations agreed to send in a United Nations International Force for Lebanon, UNIFIL 2, to ensure that South Lebanon is weapons-free. So since 2006 and now, 20 years, what has happened? Hezbollah has come in, 50,000 Hezbollah has settled in southern Lebanon, all over Lebanon. 100,000 missiles have been stationed against Israel in Lebanon with the UN force there. It's just a walkthrough for Hezbollah. So again, there's a failed strategy here. You see, friends, the problem is this. All this United Nations International Force, their mandate has always been at Chapter 6 force level. Chapter 6 level means you cannot proactively take out the enemy. If you have to shoot, you can only shoot in self-defense. And therefore, you are powerless to disarm the enemy. The enemy sees that the UN forces is important. That's why Hezbollah could easily walk in. or without fighting the United Nations force. So they need Chapter 7 to enforce the disarmament of Hamas in Gaza. But giving the ISF Chapter 7, will it work? When all the ISF are from Muslim-dominated countries, question of experience and the political will is there. Have all these countries got the experience to fight Hamas? None. Except Israel. And being a Muslim nation that are sending all this ISF in, you cannot be seen to be taking arms against a fellow Muslim on behalf of the Israelis. Okay, so there is a very sensitive thing that all these countries are considering. And that's a big problem. And so without the will, without the experience, Jordan, UAE flatly refused. The recognition is that the only one who has been able to fight Hamas is Israel. We'll need Israel to take them out if you want to enforce demilitarization in Gaza. Now, of course, Turkey could possibly come in again. Trump is looking towards Turkey, although Bibi is stopping him. It might be Erdogan himself will be the only one who is able to persuade Hamas. Get Hamas to Turkey, let them disappear from Gaza. Could be. Are we looking at that? Keep your eyes open. I think it'll go that way. Now, the only other country that has the experience against Muslim militants and jihadists is Egypt. Egypt in 2013, when President Sisi came up, it had a sustained crackdown and mass arrest of all the Muslim Brotherhood people. And in 2018, it conducted a brutal war against terror groups, ISIS in Sinai, jihadists in the Nile Delta and in the Western Sahara-Libyan border. Egypt knows how to fight all these Islamist terrorists. The only way the Arab will understand it, using ruthlessness, when Egypt's national security is at stake. But now we are talking of Israel's national security. Will Egypt be similarly involved? Egypt has that experience, has the capability, but will it have the political will to do that? When during the past 2 years, it is known that Egypt has been allowing terrorist networks to smuggle in guns and armaments into Gaza to help Hamas. And Egypt must be, again, be wary of the Cairo Street that is highly Islamist, and Egypt cannot afford to be seen to be assisting Israel against Hamas then. Such a perception will ruin President Sisi's reign in Egypt. So again, these are all very, very sensitive political games that all these Muslim nations have got to contend with. So this gap between the United Nations resolution and the reality on the ground. We are facing this reality here. There is no organization, no country that has the capacity and the political will and the motivation, the willingness, the neutrality to want to send troops in. We shouldn't fool ourselves, okay? Because Hamas, they are not going to disarm themselves. Maybe, as I said, Turkey or Qatar may be able to persuade them, giving them shelter. Hamas won't surrender. It is contrary to their DNA to hand in weapons and transform themselves into a non-violent organization. Their whole ethos, their whole motivation, their whole philosophy, their essence is mukawama. Mukawama, resistance, jihad, against the existence of Israel itself. They won't lay down their weapons. They rather die. It's either victory or martyrdom. Okay, so where are the way forward now? Well, we are back to option one, where President Trump gave to Israel. Since the ceasefire began, President Trump said if Hamas refuses to disarm, Israel has got to go back into war and to dismantle Hamas of its weapons, to unseat them from power. That's the 20-point plan. And Israel is ready. Israel has been going in right now. But will the world support it? Because now it's under the UN resolution. Israel shouldn't interfere now. So you see, there are good things and there are bitter things in the UN resolution itself. So for Israel to take out Hamas, you need support from President Trump again. So that's the problem. And Israel is saying nothing will happen in Gaza before Hamas is disarmed. That's the 20-point plan. There's going to be no rubble disposal, no rebuilding, no reconstruction, no aid even can go in. I know the human factor is there. But Israel cannot afford for Hamas to come back. Israel gave them a chance in 2006 when Israel took out 3,000 of its inhabitants from Gaza, from Gush Katif, and allowed PLO to govern Gaza. Instead, Hamas took over since 2006, infested the whole place with terror. Israel will not allow Hamas to survive this war again. Now, I come to another plan known as the Gaza-Berlin Wall plan. So right now, Israel has withdrawn to the yellow line here, allowing the world to get in, the ISF to come in to dismantle Hamas, while Israel withdraws to here behind the yellow line to ensure a buffer zone for Israel. Now, the Berlin Wall proposal for Gaza, it came from this history of the construction of the Berlin Wall dividing East Germany from West Germany. After World War II, when the Allies defeated Germany, Russia came in first. It took away East Germany. The Allies could only take West Germany. And Berlin itself was under Russian control here. But because of an earlier agreement between Russia and the Allies, Berlin was divided into 4 territories. The eastern half is Russian territory, the red zone, and the blue zone is divided between America, British, and French sector. And there was a wall dividing East Berlin from West Berlin, as well as a border between East Germany and West Germany, all the way from the Baltic Sea right to the border of Czechoslovakia here. And under the Marshall Plan, West Germany was developing again. And East Germany was impoverished because of Russian presence there. And a lot of East Germans were trying to pour into West Germany, to flee into the more developed part of West Germany. And the police and the security forces in East Germany was killing them. All these people who are trying to flee from east to west were seen as traitors, and they were shot. 750 people were killed trying to flee the borders between East and West Germany. So that's the history. And they are trying to implement this same thing in Gaza, knowing the horrible situation that happened in the Berlin Wall up to 1991, okay? So the Berlin Wall proposal is this. The east side of Gaza, all this brown side that borders with Israel, will come under Israeli control. No Hamas there, as it is today. There's no Hamas there. They might try to invade, cross the yellow line, and Israel is taking them off. The west side, Gaza City and Khan Yunis, all these places where Israel has almost taken before the ceasefire, will now belong to Hamas. Hamas will be locked down in the western side of this wall. And Trump's 20-point plan, the reconstruction of Gaza, will occur in the eastern half of Gaza. All the economic incentives will be given there, development will be given there, so that they will attract all the Gazans from the west to flee to the east, like what's happening in Berlin and East Germany. Fleeing from east to west. Here is fleeing from west to east. So the development in eastern Gaza, right, will deprive Hamas of their civilian and human reserves who would be fleeing from Hamas control in the West. And so in the end, it forces Hamas to give up, or Israel will go in and destroy them. But Israel is not ready to do it. A lot of people in Israel are having withdrawn completely from Gaza in 2006. Now you want to get the Gazans to come into Israeli territory. So a lot of Israelis are having misgiving about this. Israel could end up governing another 2 million Arabs that are now in Gaza Strip. And Israeli politicians are not keen to have them within the Israeli system. They rather want an internationally recognized border, Israel on one side, Arabs on the other side, although it is against Joel chapter 3 verse 2, you are still dividing the land. Okay. Because, friends, they see Gazans, Palestinians, as Hamas itself. Under UNRWA, been educating all these Palestinian children to be militant jihadists themselves. They have got proofs of it. And so Israel is not ready to enlarge the state of Israel, according to Joel 3 verse 2, and to accommodate more Arabs into the Israeli system. They will soon demand voting rights, membership in the Knesset. Presently, in Israel itself, you already have 2 million Arabs there. And they are causing enough trouble there. Statistics have shown that out of the 2 million Arab Israelis in Israel, if there is war in Israel, 25% of Arab Israelis will side with Hamas. 50% are saying, watch and see whose side is winning. And only 20% of Israeli Arabs will side with Israel. That's the statistics. And here you're importing another 2 million into the Israeli system. There is huge concern, a threat to Israel's national security to get all these pro-jihadis to come in. But we know, coming back to scriptures, the Gaza prophecy is there given to us in 3 places in scriptures. Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 6 to 7 talks about the day when the Philistine coast, that's Gaza itself, will become a territory that's going to be possessed by the remnant of the house of Judah. That's the end times, the remnant of the house of Judah. They're going to take over Gaza. It's said there, the land by the sea, where the Kirites dwell, the Philistines. It will be a place for shepherds and sheep pens. It will belong to a remnant of the house of Judah, future. They will find pasture there. And in the evening, they will lie down in the houses of Ashkelon, for the Lord their God will care for them and restore their fortunes. Praise God. This is the future. Gaza will return to Israel. Now, friends, I've run out of time, but go and read Obadiah chapter 1, verse 9, Ezekiel chapter 25, verse 15, 17. It talks of the same thing. Gaza will return to Israel. The Philistines will be defeated. So let's conclude, friends. Will Israel be isolated? Has Israel been blindsided? That's the issue that brought about today's session. With the F35 sales to Saudi Arabia, with granting major non-NATO ally status to Saudi, will it cripple Israel's qualitative military edge? I've explored that with you extensively. Secondly, the role given to the International Stabilization Force by the United Nations. Many countries have already signaled that they can't join the ISF if they are mandated to disarm Hamas. They can't directly confront Hamas. Only Israel has the ability, the experience, and the will to do that. And that's according to President Trump's 20-point plan. But now Israel is constrained by the UN Security Council resolution. How will Trump move forward? Interesting times for us to see. Will Israel go back into Gaza and take out Hamas? It's starting to do so now, but will UN object? That's a major issue there. And number three, a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, a stronger narrative given there than what Trump promised to Israel in the 20-point plan. So all these three major events that happened in November 2025, will that lead to a change, a redefinition of Israel's military plans? It looks like it. Will it affect long-term partnership between Israel and USA? Israel has got to redefine that and play a more contributing role and not a beggar's role with President Trump. Israel has got to be seen as an ally and not a liability to America. Major shift in policy that Israel has got to play. And finally, what will Gaza look like the day after? So keep our eyes open. Major things are moving, and we got to pray, align that with scriptures as I've tried to do that today. And let's wait for our next prophetic update. Thank you for being with us. God bless you.